server's doing something different. What's the DBA doing? And then of course, how does this look in your network IDS or in your SIM? And a lot of times when I go out and I talk to organizations, I say, how do you know? And what's going on? And that's a big question. Same thing with the actual penetration testers who are just exploiting the services. If you've got somebody coming in, running Core Impact, running Metasploit, but maybe they have a custom set of tools, what does that look like? What does that look like in your SIM? What kind of traces does it leave in your Windows systems and your Linux systems? You know, and what kind of reaction is your admin staff going to look for? And that's the kind of stuff we try to institutionalize and go on. The problem is I've only picked two different things. I've picked web application testing and scanning. The issue is that there's tons of ways attackers can come in and exploit it. So you really have to then look at your data. This gets into some of the policy stuff from outcomes. How do you want your network to behave, and how do you expect it to be behaving if it is compromised or being used in a way that it doesn't matter? So a couple of examples. Let's start off with something simple. Let's just talk about vulnerability scanning for a minute and not talk about actual penetration testing. How can your organization recognize somebody who's doing vulnerability scanning? It's real simple. Go get a vulnerability scanner. I've heard Nessus is a pretty good scanner, right? Download it, scan your network, and see what comes. Check your network IDS and check your SIM. This is a very, very simple process, and I've seen a lot of organizations, they just forget to do things like this. Maybe the IDSs are in the wrong place, looking at the wrong traffic with the wrong filters. Maybe the intrusion detection systems gives you a nice alert, hey, we detected a Nessus scan. But maybe you have a process that then takes that alert into your SIM or into your help desk and says, hey, anytime you see this Nessus scan, you can ignore it. Maybe that's not the process you really want, because maybe the next time somebody runs a scan, they're going to scan a different target, and that particular rule from maybe your IDS vendor isn't really going to find them. Or maybe from a SIM point of view, you've got people who say, hey, that Nessus scan, yeah, we see stuff like that all the time, right? From the inside, from the outside, and they're not even taking any type of political action on that kind of stuff. So the question really is how is your organization going to behave and react to something like that? That's not to say every penetration tester is going to run a vulnerability scan, but repeat the process for an actual exploit type of penetration test. So in this case, great. You get a penetration testing tool, you hack your network, and again, go check your NIDS or your SIM. Very simple kind of concept. The problem is a large organization is going to have logs from all over the place. The question really here is that what kind of logs, what kind of traffic do you make? Maybe what you're doing is you're modifying files. We just did this exercise down in Maryland called CCDC, where we had like 5 different teams, and we had about 10 pen testers test 5 teams. They each had 5 or 6 computers. We were running our stuff. We were detecting file integrity modifications. We were detecting all sorts of programs being installed and things like that. And I actually had some of the people on these teams saying, well, what does that mean? How does that go on? So a lot of times, the SIM technologies, the security technologies you already have built into your network might just not be enabled. It might not be logging, it might not be monitored, and it might not have an institutional process to bring all that together. And then, of course, the last thing is if you have somebody who's doing typical, the Cartman thing, the low-tech type of, let's just want to look at the network, see what kind of access I can get, see what kind of files I can get. That's also a very interesting exercise. It's a different kind of use case, a different kind of profile, but the question is if you have a user on the network who tries to log into accounting software, tries to log into the HR software, the accounts receivable, source code, different things like that, and they're getting denies, does that actually set off any alerts? That's exactly what a pen tester is going to do. So the question is your SIM? I actually also included your data loss prevention tool. There's a lot of tools out there that can log every time a file is shared, that log every time an email is sent with an attachment. And if this data is not being considered and institutionalized into your organization is not going to be able to recognize that something malicious is going on here. Does that make sense so far? Any questions, any comments? Now, I also see a lot of organizations who basically say, you know what, it's too difficult. All I'm going to do is I'm going to go download Metasploit, I'm going to go get Core, I'm going to go get Immunity, whatever. I'm going to scan my network, and I have a binary decision. I can either compromise my stuff, or I can't. That's very, very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. One, those tools update themselves all the time. They of course don't have exploits for the entire space of vulnerabilities or CVEs that are out there, but they do have exploits for every major headline vulnerability, probably for the last 3 or 4 years. So just focusing on them and saying, hey, we couldn't, we hired a penetration tester to come in and run Metasploit, they couldn't get in, it doesn't really mean you're done. Because you might have a penetration tester who comes in with, some zero-day, some slightly modified different types of codes. I just want to definitely put that out there. Says, if that's the way you're going to detect the penetration testers is to use the quote-unquote their own tools against them, you can't do that. I've seen 3 really good people who they're experts in Metasploit, they all use the product completely different because they have different ways of getting in, leveraging vulnerabilities, chaining them together. Very, very difficult to do. Or to just basically say, assume that they're going to repeat. So with all this being said, from a penetration tester point of view, what is the single most thing you can do to ruin their day? What's the single most thing you can do to ruin their day? What's that? Detect them? Expose them? What else? Block them? I'm looking for one other kind of diameter. So when we did this, I'll go back to that CCDC exercise we did. We did the post-mortem. So we basically had the 10 or 11 or so penetration testers stand up in front of the room, and they had each of the 5 teams, and they were basically talking about what affected them the most. Any type of defense would slow them down or cause them to waste time, try a new exploit, try a new type of thing. That's what frustrated them. So for the next basically 15 or so minutes, we're going to talk about a lot of different techniques we can use to kind of force the penetration testers into doing something that's easily detectable or in a way that's just, again, it slows them down and exposes them. So if you can waste their time, and of course that extrapolates to attackers in general, but from a penetration tester's point of view, it's extremely relevant because they usually have a limited amount of time to try to do an exploit. So from an IT security point of view, if you have this political problem, pen testers coming in and beating on you, then what you can try to do is have defenses, look for defenses that are going to basically slow them down. But you need to do that in context with knowing how are these servers likely going to be compromised. So let's talk about a real simple example. DNS. How many people have started to profile a site and started doing DNS lookups on certain types of things, and those are my targets, right? Doing DNS analysis when you're off-site is a great way to figure out some things. People name things very useful, right? Hey, I did a DNS lookup for exchange.company.com that wasn't there, and we did an IMAP lookup for them. So why not actually have some records that are really, really indicative of nothing, right? That they give false leads, and then you can take those IP addresses and go ahead and do that. Now the question is how, does this really, really waste time? Well, what about from an insider point of view? If you've got something like, CEO's laptop, all those kind of names that people throw around in demos and whatnot. If you put those things into production and you actually institutionalize and say, hey, look, IT, don't mess with these names, don't actually modify, but if anybody starts doing resolution on them and they go somewhere, boy, write a rule for Snort, put that rule into your SIM, tell the help desk about it, institutionalize that. And that's a very, very simple thing you can do to actually try to find that. Now you could put false targets out there, we'll talk about honeypots in a little bit, but that's definitely interesting. Now the thing is, before you start going out and saying, hey, we need to mess with our DNS, you got to keep in mind, DNS is probably the most reliable service that's on the inside of your network. So if you start willy-nilly just adding records and stuff like that, you really don't want to be the security guy or the IT security lady who's suggesting this and then you cause a DNS outage. So you have to keep up with that. And the question is, do you want to change them? Do you want to do different things like that? But again, you want to give the folks who are doing the recon a little bit of a little time. Now, if they're just pointing to your address space and scanning and trying to hack it, of course, this isn't going to slow them down at all. Now, a slight variation on this is people who do the brute forcing. There's tools you can download that basically point to a domain and it's going to come up and try to find and guess different types of DNS names. So one of the things that I've seen people do, I've actually seen some universities, some government agencies do, I don't have the source code to point you to or anything like that, but they basically have DNS configured such that if their DNS servers can't resolve something, they send it over to another special DNS server who'll resolve anything you want pretty much, but he'll slow down the responses. So the idea is while you're doing this sort of brute force analysis, the more queries you make, the slower responses you get. And by the way, that sets off alarms, that sets off all sorts of things, and we know that we have a bad guy actor out there who's trying to do some DNS reconnaissance on us. But again, you have the same issues of if you're messing with DNS with your organization, you really have some issues because you're talking about messing with your most reliable service that you're probably putting out there. Now what about this? Let's assume that our systems are going to be compromised. You're probably doing a great job trying to demonstrate PCI compliance or FISMA, but at the end of the day,